this party started.
Good
Morning, you guys, and welcome to our show. Dr. Caroline Leaf is a communication pathologist and cognitive neuroscientist. That already sounds so smart in and of itself. She specializes in cognitive and metacognitive neuropsychology since the early 1980s, you guys. She has researched the mind-brain connection and the nature of mental health and the formation of memory. She was one of the first in her field to study how the brain can change with directed mind input. Caroline is on a mission to make mental health care more affordable, applicable, accessible worldwide, and to reduce the stigma around mental health. Her newest book, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, is now available for purchase. And today we're going to learn about how one can optimize mental health sustainably. Dr. Caroline Leaf, we're so grateful for the opportunity to have you on our show today.
I'm so thrilled to be on your show. So thank you so much. You're both so full of energy. I'm already happy.
Yay!
I'm happy, but now I'm even happier. And you've got the espresso. I have too.
Hey, I was watching your Instagram. Hey, coffee with Caroline. I was like, we do espresso with Erin and Sarit.
There you go. Okay, see, I tell you, it's wise minds think alike.
Exactly.
There you go.
What a compliment.
Well, hey, I'm curious. How did your passion for mental health come about?
38 years ago, I was sitting in one of my lectures, and this is how long I've been in the field. I was sitting in one of my lectures, and they said the brain can't change. And when they said that, I thought, no, something's wrong here because we as humans are constantly growing and changing, so our brain must change. And at that stage in the 80s, they didn't believe the brain could change, and that's why I did some of the first, as you read out, I did some of the first work in that field. And I basically said to the professors, but I'm sure mind can change because our brain, and therefore our brain can change. And I started working with people with traumatic brain injuries, people that had really, really severe trauma, that they'd been in comas and that kind of thing, because there was very little research about those kind of people that had those kind of issues. And my professor said it's a ridiculous question. I even did a TED talk on this, saying that can the mind change the brain? So I said, well, let me prove it. Let me take the most damaged population I can find with the brain and show that you can change. So that's where it started. And I started working with people. And one of my first subjects was a 16-year-old who'd had a car accident, and she was in coma for 2 weeks, and the doctors had written her off, and her parents just didn't give up. And then they approached me, and when they did, she was on like a second grade level. And she wanted to get back to finishing 12th grade because her peer group were now in 12th grade, and because of the time she had lost. So we worked for 3 hours a week, uh, for 8 months. Within 8 months, this girl not only went from second grade level, because she had dropped to second grade after the accident, her cognitive function just was very, very low. Within 8 months, she caught up, finished 12th grade with her peer group, and went on to become a math genius. And she was really poor at math before the accident, and went on to get a degree. And I tell you, that just got me going. And it was that passion and seeing that, and then working. I was in South Africa at that point, and South Africa was still in the terrible apartheid era. And I saw the damage around me, what was going on. So I started working in all the township areas, which is where they had kind of pushed all the black people out too. And I saw the effects of racism. So I started working 3 days a week in those areas, helping people just with their emotions and learning and education, because the education was so poor that no one was teaching them how to learn. So I climbed in, then did that, and then was doing research, and that just really got me going with, hey, minds are like powerful. We need to seriously understand mind, and no one's talking about mind. Everyone's talking about the brain and everything. I was studying the brain, and I was a neuroscientist and communication pathologist doing all this mind brain stuff, and but no one was really studying what the mind was. So I started that back in the late 80s and wanted to know, what is the mind, and what are thoughts, and what are emotions, and what's mental health, and what's this mind brain connection, and do we have any control? And that's the big thing. Can we control our thought life, and do we have any sense of agency or autonomy? And the answer to all of that is yes. The mind is separate from the brain, and the mind controls the brain, and we can control our mind because we are our mind. And so that just basically continued. Fast forward to today, and my most recent book, which is actually my 19th book in this field. And and there's some clinical trials in here. So my most recent research I put in here, summarized very simple, because I think it's so important that people see the science, the evidence of how brilliant we are as humans, and how we can change our mind, and what happens when we do in our brain and our body. So there's a quick overview.
I love it. You know, one of the things that we often say is that your mind can either be your greatest liability or your greatest asset. So, you know, my question for you is like, how does one change their mind from, you know, like a liability to become their greatest asset?
I love that. I love that question. It's a really great question. Well, that's why I talk about cleaning up your mental mess. Because if I note that I say clean up your mental mess, we do have this ability to make our mind our greatest liability, because it is. The problem is that people don't teach it. People don't tell us what mind is, as I was mentioning already. So what we need to do to switch it is to understand what mind is, and then how to manage it. So if I can start there, I'm going to use some props. I've got some really great props here. I've got a body, and I've got a brain and a skull. It's not real, wish it was, but I don't have any real live brains here at the moment. But essentially, our brain and our body. Oh, I shouldn't say that. My brain is alive. Okay, so our brain and our body is basically 1% of who we are. So if you look at your body, that's only 1% of who you are. What's the other 99? Your mind. That's what's so powerful. So the difference between a dead person and us here alive having this conversation is our mind. Our mind is that aliveness. It's this you-ness, this ability that you, the three of us and everyone listening and watching, have to have a conversation and to process each other's conversation. When you open your eyes in the morning, between the time you open your eyes and you go to sleep, your mind hasn't stopped converting more or less 8,000 to 10,000 experiences that we have in a day into physical protein structures inside of your brain. So your mind does this, that kind of, you experience life with your mind, and you process that, and you put that into your brain. Literally, your mind literally puts that experience into your brain as these energetic waves, and then your brain responds on a chemical and electrical and genetic level, and then that. So what you're hearing me say now is converting into these little tree-like structures inside of your brain. So you're growing trees inside of your brain, and you grow and these are thoughts. Thoughts look like trees, and you grow around 8 to 10,000 of those in a day, which is really amazing. And not only does your mind convert what you hear, what you're hearing, thinking, seeing, and feeling about in your environment, but it also puts it into your brain, and it also puts it into your body. So every cell of your body also is storing a memory of what you are hearing at the moment, and in the DNA of the cells of the body, and in your gravitational fields of your mind. So let me start that again, because I know it sounds super confusing. Body is 1%, mind is 99. What is mind? It's actually a gravitational field that moves around and through the body. So each of us have our own gravitational field. This work started back like 150 years ago, early 19th century. Einstein was already talking about how we have photons and we emit photons, and you can experience photons. If you think of someone who gets mad and they get angry, and you may be in a conversation, they start screaming and shouting at you, and their body movements and words, it feels like you almost stand back. It feels like something's hitting you. If someone's angry and they do this to you, that is genuine, your gravitation. You're shooting photons from your body at that person, and you can feel that. So in other words, our mind has this physics quality of these gravitational fields. And to understand a gravitational field, think of the fact that none of us are floating at the moment. We're staying seated because of gravity. So we live in gravitational fields, but we each have our own gravitational field. And why is that important? Because that's what you are using at the moment to actually process what you're hearing. So at this very moment, at 400 billion actions per second, you and all the listeners and viewers are taking my words and processing them through this gravitational field. Psychologically, that means that you are thinking, feeling, and choosing at 400 billion actions per second, what you're hearing me say, and you're putting that in your brain, and your brain is turning that into little trees made of proteins. And like a tree's got branches and a little trunk and roots, the roots are in the pot. My words are and our conversation are the roots. So that's the source. The roots are the source. And then the little tree trunk that grows and the branches are how you interpret what I'm saying. So everyone here, I don't know how many people are listening and watching, but however many there are, you're all hearing the same stuff. So your roots are all the same. But the interpretation of what you're hearing is different for every person, because we all have our own unique mind. We all have our own unique way that we think and feel and choose. So on a psychological level, the mind is the 99% mind is how you think, how you feel, and how you choose. So when you think, you feel. When you think and feel, you choose. And you're always thinking, feeling, and choosing. And that's what keeps the brain and body alive. Your thinking, feeling, and choosing drives your brain. It drives your eyes. It drives your heart. It drives your lungs. It drives your digestive system. Everything about your functioning is driven by your mind. So mind is number one. Mind even controls the digestive system. So if you, let's say that you have just eaten a great healthy organic breakfast, okay, cage-free eggs and organic and the whole thing, but if you're still worrying and your mind's like out of control, you would have lost up to 80% of the nutrition of that good food because your mind is out of control. So, I mean, this is why it's so important to get our mind to that it's an asset and not a liability. So, for example, like I always do fasted workouts. So the other day, my husband and I are at the gym in the morning, and one of the ladies waves at us and says, "Hey, you guys are here early are you here just to get your workout over and done with?" And my immediate response was, no, if I just came to get my workout over and done with, I would lose probably 70, 80% of the benefits because my mind was wrong. So your mind's driving the benefit of your workout, the nutrition of your food. That's why it's such a liability or an asset. So if I go there with a bad attitude, or I eat with a bad attitude, or I do anything with the wrong, no mind management, you mess up. So you're getting the picture. I see you both getting super excited. Do you want to ask me some questions before I unpack that in more detail? Go for it.
My question is, can we just pause for half a second so that people can put out the fires on their paper from all the notes that they're trying to take as fast as you want?
Have a sip of coffee.
Okay, perfect. Everyone have a sip of coffee.
So while you guys are writing this, this is just an off-topic question. Like, tell us about your coffee. What is your coffee of choice? How do you drink it?
Hold on. Can I ask, you said that we think, choose, and feel at 4 billion what per second?
Axioms.
We think actions. We think, feel, and choose. So you think first. When you think, you feel. That's the order. You think. As soon as you think, you'll feel. As soon as you think and feel, you'll choose. So those three always work in order, and they never work apart. So and it's 400 billion actions per second on the non-conscious level of the mind, which operates 24/7. The conscious level, which is what we're in now, and that conscious level is when we awake. So when you awake, your conscious mind's operating and your non-conscious. Non-conscious is going at 400 billion actions per second, 24/7. But when we're conscious, we experience that every 10 seconds. So every 10 seconds, we can actually be aware of how we are thinking, feeling, and choosing, which is really amazing.
I don't think my calculator even goes high enough to understand or display how many actions per day we have, because per day there's 86,400 seconds.
And then you've got that. So that's how fast it is. So
4 billion?
400 billion actions per second.
So 400 billion?
400 billion actions per second. It's actually faster. It's 10 to the 27, but that's just too hard to explain. So I use 400 billion actions per second. So it just means and that's the non-conscious. And that's the biggest part of your mind, where all your thoughts, which are like trees, and like a tree's got branches and roots. You can see lots of branches, lots of roots. Every thought has got lots of memories. So what is a memory? What's a thought? That's a thought. A thought's one big thing. It's a tree. And then the memories are the roots and the branches. See, so one thought's got lots and lots of memories. So if you bring a thought up, it comes up with lots of information, because the thought is the concept. So the thought might be coffee. And then an experience, that's the thought. But then there's all the experience of your coffee experience. So everything you know about coffee, and then how you experience coffee. I mean, that's such a stupid example. But let's say it's this conversation now. We're talking about mind, brain, mental health, that kind of thing. So this thought that everyone's building is mind, brain, mental health, whatever you called it. But as I'm speaking, I'm giving you lots of memories in the roots, and then you immediately, instantaneously, at that 400 billion actions per second, you are building the branches, your interpretation. These are your behaviors and your emotions, what you think, feel, and choose about what I'm telling you. So you build this combined thing, and then this is the thing that drives what you say and what you do. So this is behind your action. So this is a healthy one. Here's a toxic one. So this is the liability issue. Okay, so here's like a toxic thought. So this looks like, and the thoughts look like trees in the brain. The healthy thoughts, the proteins are all folded nicely, and the energy waves are all right, and the chemicals. This one, the proteins are all folded weird, and it's like the Walking Dead, you know, in Game of Thrones, but it's alive. You know, this is alive, but it's the proteins are distorted, and the energy is all weird, and this is in the brain. And this is our brain, this threatens survival. In fact, your brain's immune system will look at this and say, hey, that's a threat to survival, in the same way that it does with something like COVID virus. So if you have any virus in your body, your immune system says, hey, get rid of that, send out immune factors, send out the soldiers to fight. It does the same with a toxic thought. So let's say that this is now, the roots are always the source. So let's say now that this is something like in childhood, you maybe have abuse, or you get bullied, or you have an issue in a relationship, or whatever, trauma. That's the experience. That's your interpretation of the experience. And that then is determining your behavior. And so if we don't deal with these are threatening survival. Our body's going into high levels of inflammation, and that increases the vulnerability of our brain and our body by 35 to 98% to diseases. So I'm not saying that if you think a toxic thought, you're going to get sick. I'm just saying that if you don't manage your mind by getting rid of these things and dealing with them, because we do this all the time. We're all a mental mess. If you're human, you're a mess. That's just bottom line. But you can manage it. That's the difference. You can be every 10 seconds, you can self-regulate. You can accept that you're a mess. You can recognize the mess and you can fix. If you do that, you decrease the vulnerability of your body to brain and body to disease. But if you don't, that's where the liability factor comes in. If you just bumble through life and just crash through life and just react and don't deal with anything, suppress the traumas, suppress the patterns, ignore all those warning signals, then you increase the liability of your body. You increase the vulnerability of your body. It's much easier for you to get sick. And when your body and brain are sick, then your mind is also affected, because your mind moves through the brain and the body. So it's like trying to use a broken computer. You know, you've got to look after both, because there's this feedback loop. Does that make sense?
I think based off of the number of actions per second that
this has really got you. This has really got you.
my head has spun around 16 times.
Well, it just shows you how brilliant we are. Humans are phenomenal.
Yes, it's absolutely a miracle. And I wonder, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, if she has the ability to practice all of this knowledge that she has and put it into application, she's going to live to be 200 years old.
Maybe I will, as long as I don't look like someone who's a shriveled up prune, you know that. Can you imagine what someone would look like at 200? Oh my goodness. But you know, we can live longer. We can. And the biggest thing, though, I think what's more important is we want to we want to keep the health of the quality. We don't want just length, we want quality. And we want that mental peace. We don't want to be, and I'm not talking toxic positivity here. I'm not talking the law of attraction. I'm not talking all that stuff. That stuff doesn't work. That stuff's just, you know, it's a misinterpretation of what really is happening. We need to accept that depression, anxiety, these things, this is part of who we are as humans. They're just responses to adverse circumstances. But we've had this terrible narrative spun to us over the last 40 years, which tells us that, hey, if you feel anxious or you feel depressed or you feel anything like that, you're mentally ill. You suddenly have a mental illness. And we hear all the time the words mental illness, and mental illness is on the rise. And then, you know, here we get to the pandemic, and then the messaging that we're getting even more is this tremendous fear messaging that mental illness is on the rise, and now we're going to have another pandemic in mental illness. And I disagree with that. I disagree with the fact that mental illness is on the rise, number one. What is on the rise is mismanagement of mind. That's created the issue. So what we've had for the last 40 years is we've been told this story, and I watch this because I've been in, this is the length of my career, and this thing started at the beginning of my career. And what thing? This thing of understanding more and more about the brain, which is a good thing, but it's been a bad thing in that everything now is about the brain. So the humanity has been taken out of the factor, and we've become our brains. So mind and brain have been seen as the same thing. And as I explained right at the beginning, mind and brain aren't the same thing. They're two separate things. Mind is this 99% fast thing, that processing, think, feel, choose thing. Brain is the physical that just is a responder, brain and body. But if we make everything about our brain, and as soon as someone is depressed or anxious, we say, okay, now you've got a brain disease, you've got a mental illness. I mean, that is not actually the science. It's not accurate. And that thinking pre-COVID, just before COVID even hit, this kind of thinking that you are your brain, and that if you have any kind of emotion, it's indicative of an illness like diabetes, and that you have a chemical imbalance if you have depression. That's not accurate science. Not even scientists worth a grain of salt will talk about chemical imbalance. It's not even a scientific concept. And billions have been spent trying to say that if you feel depressed or sad or anxious, there's something wrong with you. And that's terrible. Now think of it like this. Let's say that you have a really bad situation, a couple of bad situations that happen, and it makes you really anxious. Now that anxiety in response to that bad situation is a normal response to adverse circumstances. Now let's say you go to a dinner party and you're sitting with your friends, and you turn around to them and you say, I'm going to paint two scenarios, and you say, okay, I went to the doctor today and I have been clinically diagnosed as having a neuropsychiatric brain disease. I'm mentally ill. Everyone at the table will look at you and think, whoops, I better keep quiet, delicate, treat them differently. You don't know what to do. And the immediate thing is that, okay, there's something seriously wrong with that person. And you kind of pull back. But if you went to that dinner party and you rather said this, oh, guys, I've had the most terrible week, and in fact month, and then it triggered all the stuff from my past, and I felt so anxious. It's been and you proceed to explain what you've gone through. Everyone leans in and everyone says, oh, I'm so sorry. How can we help you? Gosh, I know what you mean. I went through this. And suddenly you're sharing. And now it's not this weird thing that's happening. It's just a normal human response. Can you see the difference there? What we've done for 40 years is we've said, as soon as someone feels sad or anxious or whatever, and the medical community, the psychiatric community, the mental health concept has been, there's something wrong with you. No, there's nothing wrong with you. You're a human. And humans are messy. Life is messy. You've had adverse circumstances, so therefore you are responding in a quite a normal way to an adverse circumstance. So depression and anxiety aren't an illness. They are warning signals. So look at this tree here. It's generating a warning signal. So depression and anxiety are warning signals which is your brain and your body and your mind saying, hey, wake up, pay attention. This is actually causing an immune response in your body. There's increased inflammation, your cortisol's going up, your heart's going to be affected. Do something about this. And that do something isn't suppress it with a drug, because then it doesn't go away. It just gets shoved down and your brain just gets numbed. And that just causes brain damage. So you don't want that. And then when the drug wears off, this is still there. But now you've got this, plus you've got the damage from the drug. Now you've got two things to deal with. That doesn't help anyone. So then they give you more drugs. And then they tell you when you've got more side effects that your illness is coming back. We've been told such a terrible narrative, such a hopeless narrative. In fact, the narrative has been so bad that by the time, just before COVID hits, between 1996 and 2014, a huge population study was done looking at what's going on. There's something weird going on. We're advancing in medicine, we're advancing in technology, and the decades-long trend of people living longer because of advances in medicine and technology was suddenly starting to change. It was suddenly starting to go backwards. By 2014, and then confirmed by 2021, we're sitting now in 2021, where instead of people living longer because of advances in medicine technology, people are dying 8 to 25 years younger from preventable lifestyle issues. In other words, mind management. That is shocking, that we live in a world with medicine and technology where it's at, and people are dying younger. Unacceptable. And if you track it back, it's preventable lifestyle diseases. And what runs lifestyle? Mind. And also this started 40 years ago. And so you can't just do this kind of thing and expect no consequences. So now we're sitting in an era, and now COVID hits. And then it's taken another year of people's life. And now they want to carry on with that narrative. And they want to say, oh, now we need to increase screening, to increase labeling of diagnoses. So get more people labeled with anxiety and depression, and get more people on drugs. and hopefully in a bit of therapy, but a lot of the therapy is conditioning treatments, which doesn't get rid of this. So that's the picture, but there's hope. I mean, that's a very awful picture I've painted, but there is a grassroots movement. There is a lot of, the majority of science is counters this. The problem is that the voice has been, that bad voice has been very strong, but there is a movement, and I'm part of that movement. And, you listening now are part of that movement, and anyone who hears this message, and this is one of the main reasons I've written this book, is to tell people that you don't have to get sucked into that it's okay to have a mess, because as you open your eyes and you experience, now you like numbers, Erin, the 8,000 to 10,000 events during the course of the day, which are informed by another 20 to 30,000 memories that you already have, in thoughts that you already have. So your mind's going through like 30, 40, 50,000 thoughts in a day. The 10,000 that you're building, another 20 or 30,000 that are just existing, that are coming up and being stimulated as you go through the event. All of that's experimental. None of us quite know how it's going to work out. So because it's experimental, it's messy. So number one, it's okay to be a mess. It really is. It's very normal. As you listen to something, you're trying to make sense of it. As you read that email, do that text, read that text, get into that business meeting, do the podcast, whatever it is that you're doing, have the conversation. Things happen. I mean, someone will say something to you, then you turn to your partner, your friend, or whatever, and you say something you don't mean, and then you've got to, that's all okay, as long as we don't just stay in that mess. As long as we recognize, oops, I made the mess, catch it, fix it. And that's where the 10 seconds consciousness awareness is great. So neuroscience shows us that we can do that every 10 seconds. So I'm not asking you to like set your stopwatch, ping, every 10 seconds. That's unrealistic. What I'm saying is that here's the science. You can self-regulate. You can do it all the time while you're awake. And you have veto power. And there's the liability question. You have two minds. You have one, you have mind, but your mind can split into two. And this is a good splitting. You can split into your wise mind, which is your survival mind, and then you have your messy mind. And we all know what that is. You nodding. Like, when someone says to you, or maybe to each other, you ask each other some advice, and you give each other this advice, and you think, where did that come from? That was brilliant. It was just like this amazing advice. Or you just know something is right, or you just know what to do. That's your survival mind. We have this optimism bias. We are drawn to the negative, not because we like the negative, but because we've got to fix it. It's our wise survival mind that is saying all the time, survive, survive. So anything that's toxic, signals come out, fix this. Anything that's toxic in our environment, we're drawn to it to fix it, but we don't always know how. So you've got to experiment, and you've got to give yourself grace to experiment. But then you've got to also monitor that experimentation, and that's management. That's mind management. And that's what I mean by cleaning up your mental mess. You can stand back literally and observe your own thinking, feeling, and choosing every 10 seconds. That's what we see from neuroscience. And the minute you do that, you pull this ugly, toxic, whatever it is, whether it's the trauma, whether it's the toxic habit, whether it's just the pattern that you're in, cycles from the past, stuff from generations comes through. We can break those cycles, but all of that impacts what we're doing. But we can watch ourselves. We can see, what are the patterns? What are the cycles? You can have a situation like just the other day, I was on a way to a workout with my daughter. I've got 4 kids, 3 of them work for me, and my husband, who you met, works with me. So we're a family business. So it's super easy to get irritated with each other when you're family. You're living and working together 24/7. So we have to really work at this. We apply the Neuro Cycle, which is a system I've developed all the time. The other day I got up, I'd gone to bed too late. I'd done too much stuff. Didn't apply all my things that I know what to do. So I also do it. I also make the messes, but I own it. And I got up worked up, and knew I was worked up, and I knew I must do a neurocycle, but I rushed off to my workout because I woke up late. And my daughter was in the car with me, and she said something totally innocent about a production we were doing that day. And I got totally irritated. I snapped at her, and here I'm the mother, here I'm the mental health expert, and here I'm making such a mess. And then we get to the workout because it's 2 minutes away. We jump out of the car, run into Orange Theory, jump on the treadmills, and on the treadmill, I did my neurocycle. I immediately did the 5 steps of the neurocycle because by recognizing I've made a mess. So I owned it, and I immediately did the whole process and caught my daughter's eye. She caught my eye because she was as irritated with me as I was with her. I mean, we own it. We're not scared to say this. And we caught each other's eye within 5 minutes of being on the treadmill, gave each other a big smile. And after class, it was like, who could get to each other to say sorry first? So what could have been a mess and an ugly day, and a day where that argument could have messed up the whole day. It could have put a bad feeling on the day. I mean, you all know what I'm talking about. We caught it. So I'm not saying that I'm that I've got it all together. I developed the system. I've been in it 38 years. I worked in clinical practice for 25 years. I should have it all together. And here I'm telling you, I'm 57. I've been in the field for 38 years. I've got 4 kids. I've been married 34 years. I still mess up, but I know what to do. That's the difference. I can catch it fast, and I'm getting so good at it that as it's happening, I'm catching it, and I'm neurocycling all the time. It's become a lifestyle, and I'm recognizing the patterns that I need to then spend daily time working out. I mean, that's the system. We can jump into that now. So I've said a lot. You guys want to ask me some more questions? And by the way, I drink organic coffee, and I've got a double espresso in here because it's double espresso.
Okay, so I want to go all the way back. There's, several people within our community I mean, if you're human, I agree with you. If you're human, you have anxiety, you have depression, you have negative thoughts. All of these things exist. And I'm a true believer in, if we weren't meant to feel them in one way or another for some purpose, they wouldn't exist.
Exactly.
So, when I think about, the diagnoses that come out, I think that perhaps it's just our way, if we don't understand that it's a matter of managing your mind, not necessarily that something's broken with your brain. I think that it's our way of trying to understand what it is that I'm struggling with. So we put the label depression on it, or we put the label anxiety on it.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to understand and comprehend what's happening. And so we make this box. And then what our issue is we get trapped inside this box, and we become small because we think we have to fit inside this box because that's what we've been told we are. And instead of saying, I can be who I want to be because that's my choice, somebody's told me what I have to be. And so now I'm going to shrink myself to try to fit in this box. And now I'm uncomfortable because I'm stuck in there and I'm not supposed to be. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. And what I would love to ask and know from you, and maybe this is part of the 5-step process that it sounded like we were going to get into.
Yes. Whenever you read yeah.
Is, people in our community now, I could imagine, I'm like, okay, if I were taking like antidepressants or things of this sort, because I know there are people in our community who are on these things. And it's like, okay, well now, I could imagine them being like, well, should I be taking these? Should I not be taking these? Like, is this wrong for me? Is this bad for me? What happens if I go off of it? I feel like shit, It makes me sick and it does this and that. So I'm like, okay, before anybody like does anything dramatic, how do we approach this situation?
I'm so glad you said that, and that you actually jumped. You actually were so good. You jumped in at the right point, because I would have brought that up. So you answered that. You asked that beautifully, and you explained that beautifully. Let's go back to your box. You do get put in a box, and that's the issue. So that label, for a time, I totally agree. Sometimes when your mind, I mean, let's face it, when our mind's out of control, it's frightening. And when we feel immersed in depression where you can't move and just life is hopeless and you just want to die, that is frightening. And when you feel so anxious that your heart's racing and you're having panic attacks, it's really scary. And especially if it's becoming a pattern, especially if it's happening a lot. So first of all, to everyone out there who's experiencing that, if anything, I am validating your experience. I'm telling you that I'm validated more than just giving you a label. I see you as a whole human with a whole story and a whole context and a whole bunch of reasons why you're experiencing that. So that's really number one. And yes, the label for a time can give us a sense of, okay, this is something. It's not just nothing. It's not just me going crazy. So yes, a label can give you a level of comfort, but it's not sustainable, because what a label does is exactly how you describe so beautifully. It puts you in that box and it limits you. And that's exactly what labels do. They limit you. So once you've got the label, then what? What's next? Now you just got to take drugs the rest of your life? Where's the hope in that? Or maybe get a bit of therapy, and then if you don't get the right kind of therapy, sometimes it can get worse because you just talk and talk and talk and you don't really get to a resolution. I was interviewing someone yesterday on my live, and you guys can go have a look at it. Nate, a guy called Nate, who was raped multiple times as a child. I mean, he had the most terrible, terrible story, and he got sucked up into the religious world, and he got even more abuse, and he went to like literally 30 years of therapy. And he said that 13 of those years were just such a waste of time. It got worse and worse and worse. And I'm not saying therapy's bad, therapy's excellent, but he got sucked into a kind of therapy where he felt guilty, where he was being told he must do this, this, this. So what I'm trying to say here is, You do need therapy. Therapy is so important. Support systems, counseling, therapy. That label's okay, that helps you have comfort for a time. But the important thing here is that you have to still process this information. You don't want to stay stuck in that box. You don't want to stay, because if I had 5 people in front of me now and they all had a diagnosis of clinical depression, does that mean that you all have the same disease? Absolutely not, because depression's not an it. You aren't an it, and your experience cannot just be reduced to one word. We cannot medicalize your misery. So maybe we can start by saying, okay, your main thing that you're experiencing at the moment is severe depression. And that we acknowledge, but why? As you said earlier on, it's pointing to something. As I said earlier on, it's a warning signal of an underlying cause. So yes, you can, if you want, you can start with, okay, they've said I've got depression. And if that's comforting for you, absolutely fine. But then just rephrase it and say, okay, I've got this depression, but what is it? It's not an it. It's a warning signal of an underlying cause. So I need to embrace the depression in order to process it, to find the underlying cause, which is what the 5 steps are. And as you do those 5 steps, you can do those all the time. Your mind is always with you. You wake up with your mind, you eat with your mind, you get dressed with your mind, you are talking with your mind, you're experiencing depression with your mind, you go to bed with your mind, you sleep, you have nightmares, your mind's always. So if you're going to therapy, counseling, which is an excellent thing, you're there once or twice a week. What are you doing with yourself the other 24 hours of the day? You've got to know how to manage your mind. So that's where I come in. I come in to help you. How do I live with myself? How do I take this depression in the moment when I'm not with my therapist? How do I get the most out of my therapy? That kind of concept. So that's the one thing. So I'm not, and then the other side in terms of drugs, if you're on a medication, the last thing I want you to do is go dump it. So let's talk about drugs, medications. What do these mean? You get something called psychotropic drugs. Psychotropics are antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds, antipsychotics, and stimulants like Ritalin. Okay, those are classified as psychotropic drugs. They're not medicines, they're drugs. They're anesthetics and stimulants, the last one. So an anesthetic, like when you go have surgery, you have an anesthetic, it puts you to sleep. So these are very low doses of anesthetics that kind of change how your brain and numb your brain. So that's why initially they can actually be quite helpful, because if you're in such terrible pain that you can't face anything in that moment, to have a bit of numbing just to get yourself going again is kind of helpful. But the issue is they're very addictive and they have so many side effects. And what doctors are supposed to do, which they don't, the majority don't, is they're supposed to give you an informed consent, which is a 14-page document that has been set up by the NICE, the NICE guidelines, of what these drugs are and what they do. And if you read that and you knew what the side effects were and you were given alternatives, most of the time you probably would say, okay, I'll take these for maybe a week just to get myself out of bed, and then I will rather swap over into doing some serious good therapy that is really going to take me to the root of this issue. So that's not often done. And if that didn't happen to you, you're entitled as a patient to go back to your primary care physician or whoever prescribed and say, please, can you give me this informed consent thing? I want to know more about what this is that you've got me on, and what are the interactions and what are the side effects, and is there alternatives, and is there a way of weaning off? Okay, so that's the next thing. Third thing is you never just stop any of these drugs, because they change your brain. They change your brain's neuroplastic. Neuro means brain, plastic means to change. And what that means is that your brain is always changing. The main thing that changes your brain is your mind. So that's nice to know, because you control your mind and you can actually get control back over your mind with your mind, which is really cool. Okay. But also your brain changes whatever you put into it. So whatever drugs you put into your body will change your brain. Whatever you put onto your body, creams, shampoos, food, everything changes your brain. And this is why it's so important that we do also eat a healthy diet. The modern American diet is very damaging to the brain. In fact, this is good news. Not good news, it's kind of sort of good news. The modern American diet's more addictive and more dangerous for the brain than psychotropic drugs. So a lot of, that's how serious this is. So psychotropic, modern American diet's also something we have to address. A lot of people, when they're on these drugs, you crave a lot of sweet stuff. That's one of the side effects. And so very often you're drawn to eating the wrong kind of diet, and then you aren't always moving enough. So there's a downstream effect. So you need to be aware of these things. So you need to know, okay, if I'm I'm on these, there is an addictive component. You need to have a plan in place for coming off. You need to know what those addictions are so you can get a plan in place. You need to know about diet and exercise. But most importantly, you need to have a mind management plan in place so that you can manage your mind, because your mind can also be strong in preventing the side effects of those drugs to be as severe, and also to make sure that when you withdraw, if you decide to withdraw, just, you can drive the process more effectively. The way drugs work in your body is also very influenced by your mind. So if your mind is getting better, you can start tapering yourself off the drugs, off those meds. So you never just stop them, because if you stop them, the changes that have happened in your brain, if you just stop them like that, it's a shock to your brain and to your system. And so therefore you'll have a lot of withdrawal symptoms. And those could be even suicidal ideation. A lot of people do try to commit suicide when they just drop a drug. So that's why you don't do that. You never ever do that. I'm not advocating that. If you decide that you want to start changing your life and you're on meds, there's no guilt, there's no condemnation. This is what the doctors told you to do. So it's not your fault. There's nothing here that's your fault. I want you to just take a deep breath and relax. I validate you. You have issues that, like all of us have issues. It's okay. But if you want a plan to start changing it, maybe your first little step is, honestly, and I'm not trying to push my book on you, but honestly, this is invaluable information. I can't see all of you for therapy, but what you can do is you can get the book. You can start learning the system. I have a great podcast too, where you can listen to me giving you this advice. You can follow me on Instagram. So there's many ways I can speak into your life on a daily basis to help you. But that's the first thing. You have to know how to live with yourself 24/7. You have to learn about the power of your mind and get mind management. Then when you feel ready, go approach your doctor, ask them for that informed consent, find out more about the meds that you're on and the side effects. Start asking for what is a good plan to start coming off. And one of the key issues to coming off is that you taper, TAPER. You can't just, like let's say you're on 8 milligrams and you suddenly drop to 4 milligrams. That's too quick. It's literally a fraction that you drop a day so that your body adjusts. So tapering is the way. If you want to come off, tapering is very, very, very critical. And you need to be under a doctor who understands tapering. So if your doctor doesn't, go to another one. You're the client, you're the patient. You can go to if you're not obliged to stick with one person. Go find the doctor who understands tapering, who will walk with you through the process, who will monitor all your vitals and make sure when you come off that you have a support system, a good therapist, counselor, family support system, friend support system, so that when you feel, hey, I feel like I want to jump in my car and just go, drive off a bridge or something, that you can text your support team and they can be there texting you, being with you. Maybe you have to move if you're on your own, move in with someone. These are all things you can put in place to help you. In the long run, all I want is your mental health and physical health to be at a place where you are peaceful. So for example, in my clinical trial, we had one of my subjects, and I'm going to show you a picture of inside the brain. And if you get the book, you'll see that there's these really pretty images. And this is the brain looking down inside the brain, and that's the nose, and those are the ears. And these are looking at the different energy frequencies in the brain. So this is delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma, and high beta. And all what that means is that your brain is responding to what's going on. Now, what we want is gray. We don't want blue. Okay, we want gray. Gray, think of the easiest way to understand this is to think of the waves in the sea. And the waves in the sea, they flow like the huge waves like if you go far out to sea, you get these massive waves. And then as you come in, they're not as big. And then you get they build up to the big wave. And then you get the crest on the top, and then they crash on the beach and you get little ripples. And then it sucks back in, and the whole thing, that's a gray brain. That's what we want. And we all have our own version of that, but we want that kind of flow. And we want that happening. Get my skull brain out across both sides of the brain. That means I'm going to have enough blood in my brain and oxygen, and there's going to be a balance between the two sides of the brain. And it means the different parts inside can do what they're doing. And that means that my DNA and my body are getting the correct instructions. And it just means that I've created an environment where I'm more resilient. Doesn't mean I'm not going to be depressed or anxious, but I know what to do about it. Okay, so this particular case subject was in my experimental group, which meant that this particular subject got the Neuro Cycle, the 5-step process that I've developed to manage your mind. So over 38 years, I've developed a system called the Neuro Cycle, which is 5 steps that have been meticulously worked out to get all this brain stuff and body stuff happening. And when so this person got that. Okay, this is one of the subjects. So day 1, day 21, day 63, they got tested. So very quickly, I looked in their brain. I looked at blood markers, like what's your inflammation like? What's your immune system doing? What's your heart doing? That kind of stuff. What are the biomarkers? I also looked at the person's psychological aspects, what's going on with, where are you in terms of anxiety, depression. I have a scale as well, which looks at how effective is your mind management. Are you even mind managing? And we also, the most important thing is we looked at the narrative. Who are you? What's your story? What's happening? That's the most important aspect. So we looked at all that stuff at day 1, 21, and 63. And then there were 4 other points that we also looked at them. So the point is that 7 times these people were evaluated. So they were made very aware of their issues. This person at day 1 was saying, I am clinical depression. It was their identity, not even I feel, but I am. The label, the box. They said they had tried everything, every medication, combinations of medication, therapies. They were so depressed they could hardly get out of bed. Their work life had gone for a loop. Their relationships had gone for a loop. They were ready to check out. And this particular person, that's what the blue brain is, shows low energy, flat wave, not that nice wave I described, but flat wave. Long story short, they did the neurocycle every day for 15 to 45 minutes in app version. It was in an app. And this, by the way, there is an app that goes with it called the Neuro Cycle App, which is available on Google and iTunes. It used to be called Switch, so some of you may have it already, but from today or tomorrow, it swaps over to Neurocycle, and it's got tons of content on how to manage panic attacks and overgeneralization and perfectionism and everything. And this book's also got those examples in as well. Okay, so what happened? On day 21, after using the neurocycle every day for 15 to 45 minutes, this person got a gray brain. This is radical. This is someone who had given up. This meant that this person was no longer saying, I am depression. They were saying, I feel depressed because of, and it's okay. Listen to that. From I am depression to I feel depressed because of, and it's okay. Because of, so they knew there was a source, there was a reason. They were starting to see it. They were starting to feel better, sleep better. By day 63, and the reason we go to day 63 is that to create a habit doesn't take 21 days. In 21 days, you'll find this toxic tree, you'll break it down and you'll reconstruct it into a healthy tree that you can say, I feel depressed because of, but this is what I'm going to do with my life from now going forward. But to make, that'll happen by day 21. But to make this strong enough to actually impact your day-to-day life, your behaviors, to be a habit, takes 63 days. So day 63, the brain's even more gray, we're getting more green, and that green is telling us that I know what to do. This person was saying at day 63, I understand depression. It's okay if I'm depressed and anxious. I embrace them. I'm not scared of them, because when I do that, then I can find out they're telling me something about my body. They're warning me. I'm so excited if I get depression. This sounds crazy. This is the kind of comments they made, not because I'm depressed, but because as soon as I feel depressed, I know what to do. I can manage it. It's not a scary thing that controls me. It is something that's telling me something. And here I can go do my neurocycle and I can find out why I'm feeling depressed today. I can find my activator. I can find my antidote. I can do something. And I allow myself to be depressed because it's telling me it's part of my character development. Allow yourself the guilt, the condemnation, all those things, but allow it. But when I say allow it, I don't say wallow. I say recognize. There's a huge difference. I'm not saying wallow and sit there and stay there. I'm saying embrace it, to do something with it. And embrace means bring it in your fold, gather it into your fold, because it's telling you a message. It's a helpful messenger. It's not a bad enemy. It's not your enemy. So embrace it for the message. It's hard. Through your tears, through your panic attack, you can embrace and you can move through. And then give yourself permission to feel those emotions. Part of those emotions are part of our character development. Does that kind of answer that question?
More than.
Good.
And I want to say to you, like, everybody, I'm trying to keep up. I was trying to keep up with the comments, but also trying to listen. But I know that the comments will disappear and not come with the video afterwards. So there's like a resounding thank you so much for being here and for sharing this information, because it's not, what I'm noticing too is it's not telling somebody what they have to do. You're not here to tell somebody you have to do this. Get off your medication, it's bullshit. No, the doctors are wrong, this and that. We understand that this is the scenario that we're in, and there's a reason for it. We get it. But also, here's what you can do to regain your personal control of yourself.
Yes. that
And that's
autonomy, that
incredible.
agency. It's a sense of empowerment. And I explained that in the book as well. That's why I put the science in the book in a super easy way. It's so encouraging because when you're in a bad place, to know that there's pictures, I give you pictures and there's science to show you, hey, I don't feel that I'm improving. But the brain science says I am, because in those, I can see, I know from the research and from the testing and stuff that I know what's happening in your brain as you go through day 1, day 3, day 7, day 14, as you go through the 63 days. I've done the research to show you your brain's improving, and your brain and your body and your non-conscious mind, which is the biggest part of you, know what's happening before you're aware of it. So very often, not very often, our conscious awareness and our behaviors always lag behind our actual changes that are happening. So that's why I say you pursue this for you work in cycles of 63 days. And sometimes you need multiple. If you've had major trauma, you may have multiple cycles of 63 days, but you that's been done. The evidence is there. Keep going, even though you feel like it's hard and it's painful, and things do get worse before they get better. I mean, if you've been multiply abused as a child, like that example of that guy, that Nate, who's just amazing. I mean, he as a 5-year-old, he was already raped multiple times. As he started, he suppressed and whatever. But as he started seeing what was happening, and my patients went through this too, when you start seeing and remembering, sorry, I've spoken so much in the last few days, my voice is going. When you start recognizing and seeing, oh my God, that happened to me. It's like, it's awful. It's traumatic. In fact, that picture that I showed you, that particular subject, that subject said that they got a little bit more anxious in the process, and they got actually more depressed, but it was a different kind of anxiety and depression. It was an anxiety and depression because they saw what had happened. You've got to go back to that child of 5 and actually see, now as an adult, go back and see the pain you experienced as a child. You've got to kind of go and rebuild that. You've got to go reconstruct it. So it gets worse before it gets better. And I want to show you that's okay. And that's why I said, and stress, you need a support system. You need that, and the therapy and stuff, but you can't just go to therapy without manage. What do you do with your mind the rest of the time? That's why I'm trying to put the tool in your hands that you can manage every moment of the day, the big stuff and the patterns in our life, the 24/7, and then get more out of your therapy or counseling or your chats with your friends. And you become someone you will help others. This is also the idea. This is called bench therapy. I did this a lot in South Africa and Zimbabwe. There's actually a therapy called bench therapy, where they didn't have therapists and expensive therapists. And I set this up in South Africa too. And it's where if you are being helped, you don't have to be a PhD or a doctor to help someone. If you understand this, you can help anyone. Because people will see you doing it and you say, hey, listen, I tried this. Why don't you try this process? So you can pay it forward. And then when you help someone else, you improve your own healing by 68%. I don't know if you got that. Your own healing bumps up. Every time you reach out in the midst of your worst, if you're feeling like really bad and you just need a bit of a boost, go help someone else quickly with their problem and you'll get that boost. You'll get a 68% boost in resilience, and then you'll be able to work on your stuff. So there's all kinds of cool things that you can do. Yeah, so it's not, I don't want to tell anyone what to do. I just want to equip people with the awareness that you're brilliant. Your mind, you have your wise mind, which is your survival mind, and your messy mind, and it's okay. Both are fine. Everything's okay. You're a human, and here's what you do about it. What we don't want you to do is stay stuck and wallowing. We want you to be able to grab it, process it, and move forward. As soon as you grab it and embrace it, all these little protein branches weaken. That's what neuroscience shows us. If they're weaker, you can change them. It's the pathway to empowerment. When you recognize your autonomy, your agency, and recognize that even in the midst of all of this, I'm still going to cry, I'm still going to whatever, but that's okay. Because as soon as I face it, I can deconstruct it, which is cool. And it gets weaker.
You said something amazing. I feel like I'm taking all of the talking.
That's okay. That's okay.
You said something amazing. You're like, I don't know where this percentage came from, but you said there's a 68% boost in your resilience when you help someone else overcome the problem.
Scientific research.
You guys, why do you think we do espresso every day? It's selfish, completely selfish. We are just helping ourselves. I realize this. No, so that's a joke. But at the same time, Ellen DeGeneres, one time, she's like, I was told I should go to therapy. And she's like, why would I pay for a stranger to listen to me talk when I can get strangers to pay to listen to me talk? And I thought that was genius. But you guys, it's really true. Like, I think that all humans want to help.
We do. It's survival mode. We wired for love. The scientists have literally said, I didn't mean to interrupt you, sorry. We're wired for love. Our brain and our body are wired for love, and our mind. And that means that love is survival and survival is connection. One quantum physicist that I follow talks about the fact that it's not about you, it's about you in the world. And think of waves. When waves in the sea, when they hit each other and they go under each other, they get bigger. So when two waves, so here's two waves. When they go on, they grow. So this is what's happening. We enhance each other. So we're not in a competitive world. We are, but we shouldn't be. Competition creates damage in the brain and the body. Enhancement actually grows people and increases intelligence. So everyone competing out there is missing the boat. If you want to really grow in life, you just got to enhance someone else. And then you lift your own intelligence. It's all about enhancement, not competition. Competition creates flatline. The two waves cancel each other out and both suffer. But enhancement is two waves on top of each other. And when people get their mind right and clean up their mental mess, you go into enhancement. And can you imagine the world? Can you imagine the difference in all the racism and isms and the gender isms and all the things that are going on in the world, how they would change if we were enhancing? That's what also, I have a very strong ulterior motive with my work, and it's a good one. It's a healthy one. It's to get people's minds right so we can operate back in love and back in enhancement. And then this disparity that we live in and this toxic environment that we live in currently can be altered. And it takes us, it takes the Espresso Club, it takes the people listening, it takes all of us coming together and having these conversations. And 100 people can influence 1 million people. And 1 million people can influence 7 million people. There's an exponential calculation. As we start changing, we can create this wave. In quantum physics, particles, what they do when they move from one area to the next, they kind of build up motion, like when you swing, when you push a swing, and initially it's quite hard, and then suddenly it builds, and then suddenly whoops, it goes. That's what we're doing at the moment. With these conversations are creating this movement, and eventually we'll shift. And we're in that process now. We'll be shifting to a more enhanced world, which is more loving, which is more, what humans are supposed to be. We're acting like avatars at the moment, so well, not us, them.
This is amazing.
You know what? I have another interview right now. Literally, I'm already late. But it's not a problem. I've got to jump off, but I'd love to come back again and invite myself back again to finish the conversation, because we didn't finish the conversation. So I'm so sorry. I have to go because I'm already supposed to be.
Can you pick a number from 3 to 63?
Absolutely. 60.
60. Okay.
Jessica Grant.
Jessie Grant.
You're gonna get Dr. Caroline's book.
Oh wow, cool.
Clean up your mental mess.
And we will have to have a part 2 of this, you guys. Caroline, we don't want to keep you anymore. We are so grateful for your time. This is absolutely incredible. You can see the hearts everywhere for you. And we'll get in touch so we can have a part 2. Sound good?
Thank you so much. It's so good meeting you, and I have so enjoyed spending time with you. Thank you for having me on your show. And bye-bye, everyone. Thanks. Sorry I have to go. Bye, everyone.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Take care.